Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag from the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, John, back again this week here on the Brown Sports Bag. I'm going to be talking a lot about some boys basketball and girls basketball and basketball in general and some football as well. I mean, it's if you like basketball, it's a show for you, and if you like football, it's a show for you. If you like other sports, we'll get to them at some point in time. It's just right now, it's high school basketball is in full swing as it usually is this time of the year. We're going to, as we have the last couple of weeks, we're going to start off on the boys side of things just because the 15th district is on the boys side a little muddier, and it looked like, it kind of looked like whomever won Friday night, as it turned out, Thursday night between Barron County and Glasgow was going to be in the driver's seat for a chance for that top seed in the district, and I guess that is kind of the way it works out. It had definitely been the case if Glasgow had won the game, but because they still have games left against Barron, Warren-East, and Allen again. Barron's already played Warren-East twice and split with them. They played Allen once and Glasgow once. And so now Barron is 3-1 in the district. They won the game 49-47 in overtime. It's kind of a classic game between the Trojans and Scotties in the sense that it was a close game, but it wasn't exactly beautiful basketball, John.
Well, I agree. It was not beautiful because teams had trouble scoring. When you go to overtime and the winning team only has 49, so there's not a. Now, in fairness, it's both teams had trouble, but it's not like they shot 15%. They shot better than that. It was just more. The pace was more deliberate. It was just a more deliberate type of game and so forth, which I think in general favors Barron. But it was nevertheless, a good game, and is obviously a big win for Barron. Barron led a majority of the game. Yeah, and Glasgow came back late. I think Glasgow took their first lead with a three with about a minute 20 in the corner by JoJo Driver. I think that was the three that put them up one. I think I'm right on that one. Something like that. It all kind of gets confusing at the end, but the winning play was made in overtime. Barron had a shot to win it going into overtime and missed the shot. Yeah. But the winning play was in overtime. I think Kate Hardy had a drive to the basket, and it looked like to me he kind of lost it as a strip. May have gotten stripped or whatever, but anyway, it ended up in the hands of Joshua Decker, and Decker finished it for really the game winner. Yeah, and Decker was tremendous against Glasgow.
I think I have a video of that play from the backside, and what happens is it looks like Cade was trying to pass it, but he kind of lost control, and it actually skipped off of a Glasgow player's leg or whatever, knee area right into Joshua's hands.
Right, and he finished it. Decker was great. He had 24 points and 9 rebounds.
Yeah.
And the last couple games, I thought he played really pretty well against Warren Central on that Tuesday as well. It looks like to me he's starting to get more comfortable, transferred in from Edmonson County and so forth, and he's a big kid. He's about 6'5" and strong inside, but he also has a nice touch on the outside. He had 2 threes against Glasgow. Yeah, and he was I believe he was the only player in double figure for Barron with 24. I mean, Tate Spillman, the Barron's leading scorer, only had 5. Yeah, and I'm not saying Decker. Obviously, he didn't single-handedly, but he had half the points. So offensively, he carried
more or less.
He definitely carried the load, and it was a good win for Barron. And Barron moves to 7-8, 3-1 in the district, and it's a tough loss for Glasgow. Glasgow falls to 3-11, 2-1 in the district. It was the return of Jarek Martin. Yeah. And he probably played more than I thought. He played over half the game for sure. Now, he didn't shoot a lot. He only took 5 shots. He had 3 points. He had 10 rebounds. And I don't know how many assists. He had
probably
several.
5 or 6.
He had a lot of, he was almost pass first.
Yeah.
And as long as he stays healthy, I think Glasgow will continue to improve because he's going to get better.
Yeah. I felt like there were some parts in that game where it was obvious those guys have not played with Jarek Martin for several months, where they were used to doing the things they were doing and forgetting he's kind of on the floor. I think there was a turnover by Glasgow that was called an offensive foul. I think it was late in the game, and Jarek was like wide open. There was really nobody on him, and it was the charge call probably, it's one of those questionable, as those plays usually are, whichever way it goes. But it's one of those where you've been playing the way you've been playing, and you make the moves you're used to making, not realizing Jarek's over there available to receive a pass. You don't really have to go crashing in there like that. And then there were some other plays where I thought there were some other moments in the game where he kind of got lost in the shuffle, knowing that he's actually the best player. And then there was the stretch at the end of the third quarter where, he just took over the game for about a 3-minute stretch. And it was kind of obvious what they've been missing without him out there for Glasgow. And it's kind of a little bit scary because you give him a month to get to playing. They play together. Coach Stockton gets his rotation down, and it goes back to looking like the Glasgow team that we thought we were going to see, and it's just how much of an impact he can have on a game.
Well, they're going to get better with him.
Yeah.
He's a really tough matchup for a lot of teams, 6'5", athletic, and so forth. He is a tough matchup for sure. I thought Jeremiah Driver played well.
Yeah.
He only missed one shot.
Mm-hmm.
I thought between him and Decker, those two put up really good games. He had 16 points, made 7 out of 8 field goals. I think Quentin Nunley had 13. He was in double figures as well, made a couple of threes as well as JoJo Driver. But the game was played at Barron's pace. It was a half-court game.
Yeah.
And I think that's how Barron wants to play it. And even though Glasgow has size, they had a hard time trying to handle Decker.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Barron really didn't have a really good matchup against Martin. In fact, they played zone in the fourth quarter a lot because they were having a hard time stopping Jarek Martin. But, it was a close game, and in a couple weeks they will play again at Barron with a lot on the line because, like I said, they both only have one loss in the district, and Barron only has 2 games left, Glasgow and Allen. And if Barron sweeps those two, they will have the number 1 seed.
Well, and, of course, the way it works out, Glasgow plays East this Friday, and Barron plays Allen. And then, like you mentioned, in a couple of weeks, well, the 24th, I think it is, they play each other again. Mm-hmm. And so both of them could be set up, depending on how they do against these other, against the Allen and the Warren East matchups. They could be set up where they meet on that night, and the 1 seed, the winner gets the 1 seed.
I agree. I don't think there is much of a difference between East, Barron, and Glasgow.
Right.
I think if each team plays each other 10 times, it's probably going to be 5-5, 6-4. Allen is not near as bad this year.
Right. Yeah, it's where last year. Yeah.
They are much better this year because the big reason is the Pedigo transfer from Warren East.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good guard.
Yeah,
can really shoot it. So and they've been highly competitive. In fact, they led East into the fourth quarter in their loss on Friday. They led Barron into the fourth quarter in their loss against Barron a couple weeks ago.
Right.
So they've had leads and have not held on. So whoever gets the 1 seed and possibly has to play Allen. Possibly. Allen still has some games left. They may. Who knows? They could sneak up and move into the 3rd spot. I'm not really for sure.
Right.
But they're still probably, in most people's perspective, especially with Martin back for Glasgow, maybe the weakest of the 4, but it's not that big of a difference.
Yeah. Well, and it's a classic, 15th District first-round matchup. Last year was kind of the exception because Allen was so down compared to everybody else. But most years, that 1-4, that 4 team could have 6 or 7 wins in a season, and you're still staring at just an absolute grind of a game to get out of that first round, no matter what the situation is. Rarely is the talent gap so big in the 15th District between teams that you don't have a first-round grind no matter what the matchup is.
Agreed.
But you're right. It's still preferable to have that 1 seed.
Yeah, and there are certain matchups that are better for teams than others. Barron with a healthy Martin, I don't think matches up great with Glasgow.
Right.
And they may match up better with other teams. And Glasgow has their matchups as well. So sometimes it comes to a matchup, and sometimes, your biggest rival, you're not probably crazy about playing in the first round anyway. The pressure is enough in the first round.
Yeah.
It maybe adds a little bit more when it's your biggest rival, too.
Yeah. We mentioned a little bit about what's coming up this week, too, for them.
Barron tonight plays Monroe.
Yep. That'll be an interesting game.
Should be two. I think it should be two good games. I know the boys' game will be good.
Yeah.
The girls' game, Barron's we'll talk about the girls. Barron's girls are red hot right now. We'll see about that one.
Yeah.
But the Friday, the biggest game of the week, and then tomorrow, Barron has a doubleheader with Bowling Green.
Mm-hmm.
And then Friday, it's the Allen County game. That's the Barron schedule.
Yeah. And then Glasgow, they play South Warren. The boys host South Warren tomorrow night, and then the boys and girls play at Warren East on Friday. Real quick, tonight's game, you can hear both the boys and girls games on 104.7 WCLU Burgundy with Jay Turner on the call starting at 5:45. So about 45 minutes after we get done with this show here. And then the Caverna Colonels ended up losing a game last week to Greene County 51-49. That was both a 5th Region All-A game and an 18th District contest. They agreed to do that. They bounced back and picked up a district win on Friday night. They beat Hart County I think the final was
It wasn't a blowout.
Yeah,
68-61.
It was a tough game. Apparently, Caverna struggles to play at Hart County no matter how good they are. And so, that 18th district, we've talked about it several times on this show. I mean, you've got 3 really good teams in it. I think if you looked at the 5th region, you would take maybe Greene County's ranked 1 right now in the 5th region, and some of these different ratings and stuff I've seen.
Greene and Dale LaRue.
Yeah, and then Caverna's somewhere down about 6 or 7. They're probably not.
Well, they're 7 and 8.
Yeah,
and that's the record's deceiving because of the suspensions they've had. They hadn't had full squads, but you are what you're still 7 and 8.
Right.
You're better than that, but.
Yeah.
But still, that's kind of where they are right now.
Yeah. So, that district, there's clearly a team that you want to be number 1 because you want to play Hart County in that first round in that district.
Well, it won't be Caverna. They're 2 and 3 in the district.
Yeah, they're out of it. And I think Greene and LaRue, though, still have to play each other twice.
That's correct.
So it's going to be curious to see which one of them gets that 1 seed. I understand one of the big number 1 kids there for Greene got hurt last week in the All-A.
Sprained ankle. He'll be back.
Yeah. So, they have plenty of time to get healed up because
the question is the LaRue County game has been moved anyway to late January.
Yeah.
So he should be back by then, assuming everything turns out okay.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes between the 2 of them. But you're right, Caverna's locked in. They're going to be probably the 3 would be the way it looks right now because they still have to play LaRue again, but that seals it up for them. But they don't have a shot at all at the 1 seed.
No.
Anything else in the boys' basketball you can think of before we get out of this segment?
No, I think we survived the weather in terms of they didn't, with all the weather issues, really the only games were lost were Friday and Saturday, and everybody was wise enough to move Fridays to Thursday.
Yeah.
And so it didn't look like to me any long-term loss of games, so, this week looks pretty clear.
Yep. So I know we're supposed to have another cold front maybe next week come in, but I guess the potential for snow or whatever, you just never know what that is until you get a few days closer to it. All right, this is Brown Sports Bag presented by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Welcome back to the Brown Sports Bag. James Brown, John Butler here. We're going to talk a little bit about the girls' basketball. The Barron County Trojanettes are 4-0 in the district. They beat Glasgow by 30, 57-27 on Thursday night. I keep wanting to say Friday because the game got moved from Friday to Thursday because of the snowstorm that was coming in. We got a fair amount, 4 inches or so, I think, somewhere 3 or 4 inches, I guess, depending on where you're parked in Barron County. But, so they won the game handily. The Trojanettes are just absolutely in control of this district. I thought it was going to be closer and scrappier this year. And, they beat Warren East. The last game against Warren East was a little closer, but, they were never threatened. They were in control of the game from start to finish. The first meeting, they pretty much dominated that one. They dominated the meeting against Allen County Scottsville. Come back on Friday or on Thursday night. Warren East beat Allen County Scottsville, which actually surprised me a little bit. I thought, and again, they kind of dominated Allen County. So it's setting up. Barron still has a game against Allen County this Friday night, and they have another one left against Glasgow. But absolutely, I think I mean, there's little chance they're losing both these games. So anyway, I'm just going to say they have that 1 seed locked up. Mathematically, that's inaccurate, but it's the way they're playing and the way they're playing against their opponents in the district right now, John. They're just in control.
They are in control of the district. They're 4-0 for sure. We going to turn to the game or just in general? I mean, I think they're second best team in the region.
Yeah.
I think Franklin's a clear 1. I think Barron's now a clear 2, and then I'd put Metcalf next.
Yeah.
And after I watch Bowling Green tomorrow, I can figure out where Bowling Green's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But Barron just so good defensively.
Yeah.
Glasgow is just a bad matchup. It's just a bad matchup for Glasgow playing Barron because Barron is, they can beat you defensively different ways. I mean, if they want to press like they pressed Thursday against Glasgow, they can be effective. But they can, on the half court, they're just so long. They've got Ann Ashley Atkinson is a real. They've got some. All 5 starters are good defenders.
Yeah.
Atkinson, who's about 5'9", she can guard 1 through 5. And anybody on the floor she can guard, and she just got long arms. And so was Shelby Bird. Shelby Bird's a heck of a defender too. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they put her on some of their other teams' better players. She was on the front end of the press against Glasgow.
Yeah.
Where she can almost knock it down, steal it, and then you have the best finisher on the team out there.
Right. So that's a terrible problem to have there.
Katie Elmore is she's always been a good defender.
Yeah.
Because she's strong. She's strong, moves her feet, and she's a really good defender. Mahala Burton, the freshman, I really like. She's long, athletic. I think she's going to be a really good player, but she's a defender. Katie Gerald's is similar to Elmore in terms of size and so forth. And then, off the bench, they can bring people off the bench. If you need size to guard a post player, then you have Riley Wilson, and you also have Hannah Bragg come off the bench, who's 6'1". So they are just a difficult team to score against.
Yeah,
and especially if you don't have a dynamic player or two who can get their own shot. And there's very few. I'll just be honest with you, in the region outside of the girl from Franklin. Not very many players can just go get their own shots.
Yeah. You mentioned the matchup for Glasgow against Barron and the struggle there, and that is the key because Glasgow's guards aren't very big.
Glasgow they're not very big across the board. They've got the one kid that comes they got the one post player that's got good size.
Yeah.
But for the most part,
Riley Strode,
they just have their size really hurts them against bigger teams like Barron.
Yeah. Now, I will say I was pretty encouraged by the 2 young guards that Glasgow has that came in the game. I think Reese England and Natea Lightfoot, which Lightfoot actually started. That's a 7th grader and 8th grader, I believe. I think that's what they are. They both are quick. They're not very big either, but at least they had some quickness with the ball in their hands. They're just not very experienced.
No, I think England's a 7th grader. She had 10 points. She played good. It's a tough experience to be. I mean, it's a tough, like I said, the single most effective things in girls basketball, college and high school, is size. Mm-hmm. Size that can play a little bit. You can just keep people in front of you. It's hard to score against.
Yeah,
and that's what makes Barron so effective. And Glasgow's lack of size is a problem. Glasgow only made 2 2-point field goals.
Yeah, they couldn't get anything going inside.
No, they had 5 threes and 2 2-point field goals. They only shot 17%. And, you just can't win that way. Glasgow's solid defensively. They do a lot of good things defensively, and teams in general have a hard time scoring against them.
Yeah.
And, in fact, I think there was an 8-10-point game at halftime?
Yeah.
And then Barron exploded in that third quarter.
You mentioned that press, Barron. I thought Glasgow, one of the things, if you look back in the past, that they would struggle with would seem with press them, and they would just chuck the ball away and make all kinds of mistakes. They've gotten a lot better at that, except for, as you mentioned, that third quarter, they opened and they turned the ball over several times and gave Barron easy scores, and that really was a separation in the game. To that point, basically Barron was just grinding them down with that size advantage, but they weren't really forcing them And, they weren't really getting easy baskets off their defense and that kind of thing. But then that little stretch happened. And I think I've said this multiple times already this year. Every time I look at Glasgow's roster, I'm still surprised at how young they are. Now, at some point in time, this is experienced youth, and so they've got to make that leap and become a more competitive team. But still, I just look and I'm like, okay, they're leaning mostly on sophomores and younger out here trying to compete.
Yep.
And especially this year, this Barron County team is the most experienced Barron County team
with youth.
Yes, with youth.
Yeah,
but
just two seniors.
Well, but it's that junior class. I think they have 7 junior seniors.
Maybe true, but Bird's a sophomore.
True, they are using the youth.
Burton's a freshman.
Yeah.
Freshman is
Addie Slagle.
Addie Slagle. So it's really a good mixture of some older experience and so forth. But in girls basketball, listen, it's not as big of a factor as in boys.
Yeah.
And you can win with youth. Now, 7th and 8th graders is a little bit tougher. If you got 7th and 8th graders, you need to have some juniors and seniors to help them along and so forth.
Right.
It's hard to be just that young and so forth. And but Glasgow, I think they're going to get better. You can't do anything about size. You are what you are, and if you're going to be small, you got to be ultra skilled to overcome that. Like great shooters and things like that. So they just got to not get discouraged. And for the most part, I don't think they will because they've been in a lot of games. It's not like they're getting trounced like certain teams in the area are just getting demolished. I mean, on the Tuesday before they played Barron, they lost 65-60 to Adair. 60 points is a great amount of points for them.
Yeah.
So they, there's just certain teams that I think they're going to have a really hard time matching up with. Barron is one of those teams. But the key, with Glasgow, they just got to keep working, and and it's not just working on team stuff. It's especially when you got a young team, it's working on your own individual improvement as well.
Yeah. That takes a certain level of obsessiveness, I think, about the game, love of the game, and obsessiveness of wanting to just be better and better.
That's correct.
But finding yourself in situations in games where you're like, well, surely there's got to be something I can do, and working on those skills until you can.
That's right.
You mentioned the kind of hierarchy of the region at the moment, going with Franklin Simpson, clearly the best team. Barron looks like the second best. Metcalf looking really good. They look like they're living up to everything everybody has expected of them this season.
Yep.
They won the 4th Region All-A on Sunday. That game ended up being played on Sunday. Curious to see how they do at the All-A state tournament. That's usually a pretty good state tournament.
They need to be really challenged. They need to play teams that are better than they are.
Yeah.
I think it would really help them.
Yeah. And I think that's an opportunity at that All-A state tournament because
probably. I mean, they're going. If Bethlehem gets there, that's a team that's highly rated and so forth. I mean, at the All-A, there's going to be some really good teams.
Yeah, teams like Owensboro Catholic are usually pretty good up there.
Bethlehem, you're going to get some really good ones. You're going to get some others that, quite frankly, are not so good.
yeah. There are some regions where there's like 2 or 3 Class A teams.
Yep.
And those 2 or 3 aren't the best even any close in the region.
But you should eventually make your way to play a good team. If you're good, you'll eventually find somebody that's good there.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see how that goes for them. And then I don't know, right now. Warren East and Cumberland County, and maybe even Allen, just because they have Avery Morris who can really score. Those teams maybe are kind of bumping around there. Maybe Todd County Central, which is a team that Metcalf beat in that All-A final. They have a really good player in Alexis Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's some good players out there. I'm just not sure, and it seems like you're not either. There are any more good teams out there in the region.
Fair. I think that's true.
Yeah. Are you paying attention to the state at all?
I am.
Is anybody going to beat Sacred Heart this year?
They're more vulnerable. They're a little bit more vulnerable when they lost Bender, who one of their better players, who's at U of L right now.
Yeah.
But they got Christian Academy's best player, average 18 points a game. They've not lost to anybody in the state. They've lost twice out of state.
Yeah.
I mean, it would take I don't know off the top of my head who can beat them. I know Bethlehem's good because they have the Macy girl, but I don't know if they're Sacred Heart good. Can Franklin play with them? Franklin, nobody's really challenged them all that much. I don't think they're at the Sacred Heart level.
Yeah.
There's always a good team up north. But throughout the state, there's not a Mercer County. There's not a Anderson. There's not one of those that are really out there, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Franklin may be a legit top 5 team in the state.
Yeah. They have a player that makes them potentially a legit top 5 team in the state.
Right.
A player who's with size and athleticism and skill who can do just about everything.
Yeah. I think there's probably another team in Louisville that's really good. I think it's Assumption.
Yeah.
That got one player from the best player went from Christian Academy to Sacred Heart, but the next 3 all transferred, I believe,
to Assumption,
and they got another one. It's almost like they got all kinds of these players. They're really, really good. So
that keeps happening. The private schools in Louisville are going to start wanting districts to feed their schools instead of just willy nilly.
Well, it's hard to just say private schools around here. Public schools, they get them right and left too.
This is a harken back to that Proposition 19 that didn't pass about 16 years ago that everybody thought would fix everything.
Yeah,
it wouldn't have done anything as it turns out.
I don't even look at private schools anymore. They don't get any more different players than public schools anymore.
No, the money's floating around in the system, John.
People are going right and left everywhere.
Yeah, they are. All right, this is Brown Sports Bag presented by McDonald's in Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Welcome back to the Brown Sports Bag presented by McDonald's of Glasgow. John Butler and James Brown here. John, the college football playoffs they're nearing their end.
Thank goodness. Don't you think it's lasted a little bit too long?
This reminds me of when people complain about the NBA playoffs lasting forever. I'm like, man, they figured out a way to just make this thing go on and on and on. It makes bowl season seem short.
I like having 12 teams and so forth, but daggone, I think it's kind of there's no momentum to it.
Yeah.
I don't think
they just need to play every Saturday until they get done.
That's exactly right. Just to get it, or if they can't do it this way, they need to go to 8 or something like that. But you're right, 3 weeks they need to get it over with.
Yeah.
It's just, and plus they're competing now. They're competing against the NFL.
Yeah, during the playoffs.
It's just, or they need to start it early and end January 1st. Maybe needs to be the finals or at least the semifinal. Something like that. Semifinals on January 1st. And then the finals the next, something like that. But I just think I've lost interest, to be honest with you. And I'll watch it, and I watched the semifinals, but it's just kind of, to me, it's lost all momentum. It doesn't seem that way with the NCAA basketball.
No,
because they're playing. When the tournament happens with 64 teams, it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then the next week, and then the semifinals and finals. So it's over with it. You don't have that same fatigue. But football, to me, it's just.
It's kind of crazy that you just mentioned the way you did. So the NCAA tournament lasts for a month, right? More or less.
Are we talking basketball or football?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it lasts for a month, but it feels like it goes by so fast because of the way they structure it. This thing lasts less than a month and feels like it has gone on forever already.
Yes.
And we still have a championship game to be played that I have suddenly not that interested in. And it's not just because of who's in it. It's also because the games outside of 2 of them have not been worth watching. And so that means the seed structure has to be fixed. That doesn't necessarily guarantee better games, but it does guarantee more interest. Like if you just seed the thing 1 through 12, if you're going to have 12 or whatever.
I think the other thing that's hurt them this year, there's not a dynamic player.
Yeah, right.
There's not a dynamic.
Well, the best players aren't playing in it.
There's not a top there's not a first-round quarterback, so you don't have any of that stuff either. And I think that's probably taken a little bit of luster. Ohio State and Notre Dame are big brands.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you're a fan of those two teams, and I know we have some Notre Dame fans around here, I'm sure those people are excited. But I think for most people, it's just like, how many people can name players off either team? I mean,
here's what's funny. I'll tell you this. I did not realize until the Ohio State-Texas game that the quarterback for Ohio State was a guy who brought Kansas State to glory for the last couple of seasons. It like when they were showing his highlights, and I was like, wait, that's the dude who was at Kansas State? Mm-hmm. I completely blanked on that. And I mean, because, he looked great playing for Kansas State because he was, but all this season I had no idea that was the same guy.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that's part of the deal is I don't know. There are people I've seen other places. I thought the dude had just graduated and gone and gotten his law degree or something. I didn't even know he was still playing football after he left Kansas State. And maybe that's because I'm just not that big of a college football follower in that way and with the movement of people and that kind of thing. But going back to that, they're not dynamic players. I mean, you think about the two quarterbacks that you probably wanted to see in this would have been Cam Ward at Miami and Shedeur Sanders. I don't know that they're the top two picks in the draft or whatever, but they're the top two projected quarterbacks going into the draft. And it's like having the NCAA tournament, but all the best players are actually sitting at home watching it, and which is just never happens.
Yeah, I mean,
basketball tournament.
Right. And I think it would be a good game. I think Ohio State is, in my opinion, played better than anybody else. I mean, Notre Dame's played well. Mainly defensively.
Yeah.
I mean, they're defensively. They're really, really good. They're not that explosive offensively. I think it's fair to say the quarterback is more of a runner than a passer, and they kind of was not gifted. They earned the win against Penn State, but it took a major Penn State mistake, the interception with about 40 seconds ago that set up that field goal, in which I think Notre Dame only had to move it 20 yards, something like that. And that was
an interception by a quarterback who had played really well. Otherwise, Aller,
played really well in the he didn't play well that game.
But he had played well in these playoffs, I should say.
Correct.
He did struggle against Notre Dame, but that goes back to what you said about the defense.
Right, and he struggled that one. And that was the defining turnover right there. It's and I know the Penn State coach took a lot of criticism, but when the game is tied and you have the ball with 40-something seconds to go, and these quarterbacks and these players, they're almost like professionals anyway. I mean, you have to have
been there for 5 years.
you have to have a certain amount of faith in your quarterbacks. I'm not a big fan of thinking that your quarterback is going to throw an interception. You got to have enough faith that he's going to make good decisions.
Yeah.
Now maybe a safer play would be a screen or a draw. He would have been criticized if they just ran the ball and played for overtime and then lost in overtime.
Yeah.
He would have taken a lot of heat for that. He's taking a lot of heat now that he probably should have, taken a knee and gone in overtime because his quarterback threw the interception on just a terrible throw. Terrible throw.
Going back to what I said, though, the previous two games, Aller was a big reason they were where they were.
Right.
So
he was having a bad game, though, and threw into the strength of Notre Dame, which is the defense. I don't have a problem with throwing it and going for it, maybe a screen or whatever. But in the same sense, if you don't have faith that your quarterback can't get you 20, 25 yards, they needed about 25, 30 yards to get into a field goal position, and they had 2 timeouts left. If you don't have that faith in your quarterback, then you're probably not a national title winner anyway.
Well, there's that, and if in the case of the coach, if you don't demonstrate that faith in that player, then other players look around and say, what does he think about us?
Right.
And that's part of the recruiting trick too. If you want people to come play for you, you got to let them know that you're their kind of coach.
Yeah, I've never been too critical of people being aggressive. I think being aggressive is better than playing scared.
Yeah.
So, he took a lot of – it's just like this is what sports media does, when you win, then no matter how bad you performed or whatever, you get praise. And if you lose, even though you may have done a lot of right things, all of a sudden, you've made terrible decisions. I'm not a big fan in sports media of of just arguing the results. It's what would you do beforehand?
Right.
Before, it's easy. Yeah, he threw an interception. We shouldn't have thrown it. Well, that's not necessary. You've got to make the call beforehand.
Right.
Not after the interception. Well, what a terrible call. He cost them the game.
To that end, let's talk a little bit about the NFL playoffs. And the only game that really was interesting was the Commanders and Buccaneers. And, Baker Mayfield is a guy who went from an absolute hot mess in Cleveland to a guy that you can kind of trust to make plays for you.
Yeah, he was 42 touchdown passes this year.
Yeah, but you look at the way that game turned out, where Washington gets the field goal there to win it 27-24. I think that was the final. But what happens is the Buccaneers are moving the ball. I don't know if it was a play call, it was supposed to be a jet sweep where he turns around and hands off the guy, or if it was a fake, but the fumble that basically then dooms the Buccaneers. And I noticed, Baker Mayfield was saying my fault, so I have no idea what the deal is. But I watched when they called that play and the way they were running the ball and the way they were working it, it was almost like they called a trick play, even though maybe it wasn't. It was maybe just a trickeration kind of play.
Barron runs it all the time. You just hand off to the receiver coming around.
Yeah. Except it was kind of flatline, which was kind of weird.
The timing was off. So I don't know who's to blame or whatever. But
well, what I'm getting at is going back to the play calling. Sometimes what happens is the play calling itself outsmarts itself. I mean, maybe that play would have hit big if the timing was right, but the way they were moving the ball, throwing and running, just basically running an offense, looked like there was nothing the Commanders could do about it if they just stuck with what they were doing.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it was a tough break. I mean, I thought he played really well.
I did too, and that's kind of the thing. But that's one of those
whoever had the ball last won it.
Yeah, Todd Bowles is a coach who's known for putting the game in this guy's hands. He's a good defensive coach.
Yep.
And it's worked for him his whole time he's been with Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean, They tied it. Tampa Bay tied it with 4.5 minutes to go, and they couldn't stop them. They kicked it off, and because of the great play of that rookie quarterback, Daniels, I mean, they never got the ball back.
No, that guy's pretty special.
He's pretty special. So, it was a good game. Both teams very deserved. Both quarterbacks stepped up and played well. The people who are criticizing Baker Mayfield, I mean, people we've lost their mind, to be honest. You got to blame somebody. It seems like that's another part of our society.
Yeah.
Sometimes somebody's got to win.
I never thought I would say I enjoyed watching Baker Mayfield play football, because when he was in Cleveland, I just wanted him to go away because he had reached a point where he was just annoying, and Cleveland's a bad organization, and it was a bad mixture.
So they sure like to have him back now, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would. And but if you look at the rest of those playoffs, we have a game tonight, but And I don't know the winner.
Should be a good one.
I think so too.
But the Los Angeles Chargers did not play well Saturday, and
No.
I just keep wondering how much that the fires have. That's got to affect those guys,
right?
When you're worrying about when you're either losing a house or whatever, it's got to affect your preparation.
Yeah.
And of course, the Rams have moved from L.A. They're moving the game to Arizona. They moved them, their family, and all this other stuff. It has to have some type of effect. You may go, well, they're motivated playing for LA. I don't necessarily buy that. It's the focus and the pride. I mean, it's got to be tough on them.
Football is such a routine, week in, week out routine sport that anything that disrupts it, throws everything off.
And the Chargers just didn't look quite the same, to be honest with you. They just didn't look. They've been playing so good, and now Justin Herbert's the worst quarterback ever.
He had a bad game,
he had a bad game, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff. One interception that was returned for a touchdown hit the tight end right in the hands.
Yes, right.
Right in. I mean, he couldn't have handed it to him any easier. But that's just the way it goes. He didn't play well, but I'm giving both LA teams, whatever happens tonight, I'm giving them a break. I mean, because what's happening out LA is just incredible.
Real quick, that Chargers Texans game was fascinating though, because for what we had 24, so basically for 20 minutes, the Texans looked like they had never played football before, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And then a busted play works out for them, and suddenly the game just flips upside down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way football is. The craziest things can spark a completely different outcome for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Because I was convinced the final score of that game was basically going to be 6-0 or 9-0, because the Texans, I think they had 18 yards of offense before that completed pass on 3rd and like 16 or whatever it was. And that was from their own 2-yard line.
Seemed like that was the turning point.
Yeah, and so anyway, you just never especially the NFL, you just never know how they're going to go. Anything else, college/NFL football? If we got out of this segment,
No, like I said, should be a good one this week.
Yep.
I mean tonight.
Yep. All right, it's a Brown Sports Bag presented by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Welcome back. Brown Sports Bag, James Brown, John Butler. We got about 5 minutes before we have to get out of here. I asked you last week if the SEC men's basketball was good as it seems, and you said absolutely. And then after Saturday, I decided just pick a game in the SEC and watch it. They're all just fantastic. I mean, they're all close. They're all pretty high scoring. And, I mean, when you get to, like, the Kentucky-Mississippi State game on Saturday, final was 95-90, and it was an absolute barn burner of a game.
After losing to Georgia on Tuesday.
Yeah, after losing to Georgia on Tuesday. No team in the SEC has a losing record right now. They all won. They all came out of their out-of-conference records with winning records, which is not uncommon because they don't usually play very strong schedules. But nonetheless, there are no – just watching them play in conference, there are no sandbags in the conference. Everybody's good enough to win a game.
Yeah, after Florida lost to Kentucky last Saturday in Lexington, they came back and beat number 1 ranked Tennessee by 30 at home, and then went to Arkansas and spanked John Calipari's Arkansas team.
Yeah, so, Arkansas might be the worst team in the conference.
Well, they're one of them, it looks like to me. But Kentucky, the only thing that I would worry about with Kentucky, and I think their Final Four good in one sense, is that it seems like they, on their wins, they have to, against good teams, they've got to put up high 80s and 90s.
Yeah. They don't stop anybody.
Whether it's Florida, whether it's Gonzaga, whether it's Duke, and now against Mississippi State. I mean, they have to shoot it really well. They're not winning when they get into the lower scoring games. They're having a little bit more trouble.
Yeah.
And they were hammered on the boards against Georgia. But they were better against Mississippi State. Mississippi State's really good. But Jackson Robinson had a big game for Kentucky. And he had 27 points. And Kentucky just shot over 50% from 3. So you're going to win most games that way. It was a great game to watch.
Well, Auburn ends up – they're the number 1 team today with the newest polls, and they held off South Carolina 66-63.
Alabama is the top 5 team.
Yeah. I mean, and Alabama outscored Texas A&M 94-88.
Yeah. Auburn did lose their best player. He's going to be out for a while with a sprained ankle.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they can hang on to that.
I mean, you mentioned the Tennessee loss last week, but then they came around and beat Texas 74-70 on Saturday. I mean, just every game is won just prolific scoring.
It's high level.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest blowout on Saturday's slate was Ole Miss beating LSU 77-65. I mean, and that's not a blowout because it was closer than that. I think Ole Miss hit like some free throws down the stretch to get the double-digit lead.
Well, the quality of coaching in the league is big time.
Yeah.
Chris Beard is now at Ole Miss, who I thought one day would be at Kentucky.
Yeah.
Chris Beard's big time.
Yeah.
Big time coach. So, they're just quality coaches as well, and that has also elevated the play.
Yeah, and it's just an impressive league. I mean, you can watch probably just about every game. There is the occasional, as you mentioned, the Florida beating the crap out of Tennessee, but for the most part, all the games are single-digit finals. Maybe if they're double-digit finals, it's 10 or 12, 14 points. So, yeah, every team can score, which is just incredible to say about the SEC. In the history of the SEC, every team could not score. They might grind you into some dust, but generally they didn't score. So it's just an impressive league at the moment. Meanwhile, Louisville picked up a win Saturday over Pittsburgh, 82-78.
After beating top 20 Clemson on Tuesday. Louisville's won 5 straight.
Yeah.
They are playing so well right now. They've knocked off North Carolina, Pittsburgh, and Clemson. Three of those are the top 4 in the league. And right now, according to Joe Lombardi, they're in the tournament. Yeah. Like an 8 or 9 seed. I mean, they're 12-5 now. Love how they play. I mean, they just – they had the Australian shooter Smith had 27, I think, against, and that's all he does is really shoot. But their point guard Hepburn is a heck of a player. They go to Syracuse on Tuesday. I think they just left from Pittsburgh Saturday and just went on to Syracuse. I mean, they're just playing lights out. They compete. You're talking about rebounding. They are they just rebound and compete as good as any team in the country.
Yep.
Great job by Pat Kelsey.
Yep. All right. It's a Brown Sports Bag presented by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be back here next week at 4.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.